It has been proven many times that our brains like to think simple. Concentrating on one matter is hard enough, but two is just a burden. We are wired to take the shortest routes in the fastest ways and like to be ahead of the game than others. This phenomenon goes way back to our ancestors when primary instinct was what we lived on. Stepping out of the safe boundaries of your cave meant a higher possibility in getting killed. So to live and to survive, we started to see the world as either safe or unsafe. Black and white thinking in harsh environments has helped our ancestors survive and preserve humanity to this very moment. Like this, black and white thinking is engraved in our history, our evaluations, our justifications. It has been used as a survival tool for quick and accurate answers that reply in safety matters, and was also interpreted as a reason to rule and obey, such as caste systems. Black and white thinking has become a part of our lives as a way of perception, a stiff standard that defines between safety and death, but has slowly evolved into a matter of right and wrong, success and failure, and all the whatnots that are relevant to our well-being. It is now commonly seen in our regular lives, in the form of politics, decision-making, social relationships. And as I've said before, this can be explained by the simplicity-seeking nature of human beings, the simple categorical instinct we have in explaining the overly complex world. Whether you feel it or not, black and white thinking has fully taken places in our lives and minds, allowing us to comprehend this elaborate world in a straightforward way, but bring a dilemma to the contemporary society. So why and how does black and white thinking dominate our lives in the first place? Think back to when you were young, about in elementary school. We thought that the whole universe revolved around us and that we were the only narratives in our story. Not much longer, we begin to notice that there are many more authors out there who write their own stories based on their own lives and experiences. As we get older, we become accustomed to this diversified society, but still think in our minds that we can choose and think based solely on what we want. This is the start to our black and white thinking. The strong tendency to think that everything is either good or bad, right or wrong, becomes a tool to judge others' thoughts and actions in our own terms. And we judge others in our own terms. We are stuck between our own worlds and everyone else's, and have yet to acknowledge the fact that the person in front of us has lived a different life with different people in different places. And it's really funny because the standard of good comes from what we deem as right, and rarely do we put others' opinions into the equation. Another reason why this type of thinking is harmful for healthy growth in mind is because not only does it affect our way of seeing the outside world, it also makes us wonder if we are fit to the surroundings around us. We start to lean excessively on others' praise or criticism and evaluate ourselves as either a major success or a total failure. This leads to the depressing result of anxiety and the never-ending effort of trying to living up to other standards. We, being on the borderline of becoming a full-grown adult, are currently living on the breaking point of black and white thinking. There is little middle ground on the life that we live in, yet we do not live in a world that has an absolute definition of anything. That's why I think this moment that we live in right now is a pivotal moment for us, because life is not a black and white screen anymore. You have all experienced black and white thinking in one way or another. Imagine when you first stepped into this school. You find a friend that instantly clicks with you. He or she will be the kindest, the funniest, the best fit for you in every possible way, the greatest friend you can ever ask for. He or she will be perfect until they're not. When they disagree with you or do something unsatisfactory on behalf of your standards, they will become a bad friend for you. Well, not like literally, but you'll label them as one and look for the next perfect fit. This continuous effort to find a good friend, which usually leads to unstable relationships most of the time, is based on dichotomous thinking. So, what's a dichotomy? When there's a stark contrast between two opposed ideas, such as love, hate, right or wrong, you have a dichotomy. This dichotomous thinking is what keeps us from understanding the person in front of us and accepting them for who they are. So, here's a real problem. We all know this. That's the problem. We all think this way, and know that it is problematic. So, what's the solution to this? In fact, there's not an absolute solution to this type of thinking because that would be a dichotomous way of thinking. But it will definitely help you to stop yourself from going to the extremes and understanding and slowly accepting everything in between. For me, I learned to accept differences as they are and has learned the importance of this while moving place to place in my childhood. I was a foreigner for most of my life. I was a foreigner when I moved to the States and lived there for half of my childhood. And I became a foreigner again when I moved to Korea, while having little to no knowledge of the Korean culture. I was always the new kid, the unusual face among familiar friends that have known each other for years. And it was so much more difficult to cope with the constant pack-ups and moving-ons because, one, I was an easily attached person, and two, I moved when friends were the most important beings in the world. As a teenager, being the new kid really sucks. To all of the people who have never moved to another district or country should really consider themselves blessed to be next to the people who you have known for years. And even though I have more than reason to be grateful that I even had the chance to experience new cultures and lifestyles, there was a certain sort of envy that creeps on me, mostly because I never even had the chance to know people thoroughly for more than 3 years. Being the new kid is certainly tiring. The mere fact that I was new began to land me in a place of judgment, a target of interest for those who sought out the simple pleasure of defining where I took place on the social ladder. Many of them actively called me out and told me that I was a sore thumb in the group, up until I was in middle school. It was hard, no doubt, when I moved to Korea after living 6 years in the States. Korea was a country full of delicious food and stylish fashion, but it was also a country of excessive restrictions and conservative manners that I just couldn't overlook. The word I heard most when I moved here was that I was wrong in speech, manner, performance, and being the child I was, I succumbed to what my teachers and friends told me and convinced myself that what I learned in the States were wrong and just not accepted in Korea. I became accustomed and familiar to the fact that whatever I did was wrong and what my fellow peers told me was right. There's really nothing to say about my childhood because all I did was drop my head down and just try not to be a wrong person in their eyes. But now I know that the thoughts and the cultures I've acquired from the States were not wrong, but just different from the Korean culture. Black and white thinking was a devastating weapon used by my teachers and friends to let me down when I was young. By setting a standard of what is right and wrong, unintentionally driven me into thinking myself as a wrong person. And by that means, accepting and allowing the fact that there are differences among us is very important. The audience here right now is one day going to go out to the world. You are going to take an active role in the international stage one day. What I wanted most was for someone to accept me as who I am and be lenient on the differences that I had. By accepting that there can be differences between others, we can recognize the context of a situation, or in my matter, you can understand the background of a person before jumping into conclusions, and can therefore stop oneself from immediately defining the world before them. Black and white thinking can also be reduced by the endeavor of stepping into one's shoes. I've learned this from a book that I think everyone here in this place will know. One of my recent reads, which was right before I came to this school, was the Harry Potter series. From the Sorcerer's Stones to the Deathly Hallows, 1 month straight, I read the whole series. For all of those who haven't read this book, it's about a boy named Harry Potter, saving the wizarding world and the so-called Muggle world from the evil sorcerer Voldemort. And aside from the obvious feud of good and evil, the whole series revolves around Harry Potter's coming to age and his friendship with his friends Ron and Hermione. Now, it was the simple things that intrigued me at first. Ron's humor, Harry's heroics, Hermione's wittiness. But what really brought me into this book was the basic structure itself. A nice story of a battle between the good and evil, a pursuit for justice in the wizarding world. I was all up for it, for I just couldn't say no to a predictable happy ending that was bound to happen. Now, if my train of thoughts ended here, I would have disagreed on Harry Potter being the best series of the centuries. Though, in my perspectives, I don't think that the good concurring evil and all that jazz was the true proposition of this story. No, rather than that, I think it was a problem of whether we could understand Voldemort. No, Voldemort, like Lord Voldemort, the cruel and heartless monster that destroyed everything in his path. Yeah, unfortunately him. The thing is, this story was not about a fight for justice or a noble battle between the hero and villain. It was a story about just making the world a better place by understanding the other side. The only reason why Harry, and not the other skillful wizards, was able to defeat Voldemort was because he understood him in a way no one could. Two orphans cast away from the wizarding world, but not really accepted to the human world either, struggling to live without humility, and wanting acceptance. In a way, Harry is identical to Voldemort, and the understanding he had of him, turned the tides to his favor in the end. Like this, the power to tilt our view and have insight on another person can make a huge difference. When we step into another person's shoes, we can understand their thoughts and perspectives and really understand them. And even though we don't agree with them 100%, we can certainly make sense of their reasons. Now, frankly, black and white thinking isn't all that bad. There's a reason why our ancestors have adopted the attitude to think to the extremes. But if this becomes our way of living life, and the lens that we look the world through, in this diverse society, it just won't work. There will be people disagreeing with your philosophy, and there will be people who hate the things you love. It's important to know that, yes, they can be different from you, but no one in this world is either right or wrong. The time when these perceptions have been accepted has passed, and it is time we start to see the world without the black and white lens. I was young and foolish and thought that black and white thinking was what defined us and others. But now I know, and we all know, that this isn't the case. I've learned it the hard way, with all the movings I've done and the starings I've endured, but I hope you learn it the easy way, and from now on, see the world with tolerance. When everyone thought Voldemort as the epitome of evil, Harry Potter saw the person inside, thoughts with legitimate reasons, and truths that people did not accept or refused to accept. Maybe we are viewing this world with tunnel vision, and pining to define what is right and wrong. When we accept the differences in other people, we can approach the world with a wider perspective, and see the world as it really is. Not just black and white, but a rainbow of colors. Thank you for listening.